Sometimes the people who smile at you the most are the ones quietly hoping your happiness doesn't last. For years, I believed that if you surrounded yourself with honest people, life would eventually work itself out. I trusted my friends completely. I never imagined that the people I laughed with every weekend would one day force me to question my own judgment. Looking back now, the warning signs were always there. I just chose not to see them. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 27 years old, and until last year, I believed friendships were forever. I met Ethan and his wife, Rachel, during my first semester of college. Back then, they weren't married, just the couple everyone assumed would last forever. They argued a lot, but somehow always found their way back to each other. People called it passion. I called it exhausting. Still, they were my closest friends. We celebrated birthdays together, took road trips every summer, and spent countless nights talking about our futures. I watched them get engaged, stood beside Ethan at their wedding, and honestly believed we'd all grow old as lifelong friends. But over the years, something started changing. Every time we met, there was another argument. Sometimes it was about money, sometimes it was about family, sometimes they couldn't even remember why they had started fighting. Rachel would roll her eyes whenever Ethan spoke. Ethan would make sarcastic jokes at Rachel's expense in front of everyone. They laughed afterward, but the laughter never reached their eyes. I always told myself, every relationship is different. It wasn't my place to judge. Around that same time, my own life finally seemed to be moving in the right direction. I had landed a better job with a software company downtown. The pay wasn't incredible, but it was enough to rent my own apartment and stop worrying about every paycheck. For the first time in years, I felt like I had room in my life for a serious relationship. Then I met Emma. We met completely by accident while waiting in line at a bookstore cafe. She noticed the novel I was buying and smiled. "I've read that 3 times, she said. "Is it actually that good?" I asked. She laughed. "It's either going to become your favorite book, or you'll hate every page." That single conversation lasted almost 40 minutes. Before leaving, she wrote her number on the back of my receipt. For weeks afterward, everything felt effortless. Our conversations lasted until 2 in the morning. We shared the same sense of humor. She loved hiking, I loved photography. She never pretended to be someone she wasn't, and neither did I. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't wondering if someone liked me. I knew she did, but as the weeks passed, I started noticing small differences. Nothing dramatic. Just little things that kept adding up. Whenever we talked about the future, our goals didn't seem to match. She wanted to move overseas. I wanted to stay close to my family. She believed marriage wasn't necessary. I hoped to get married someday. She wanted children eventually. Maybe. I knew I definitely did. None of these conversations ended in arguments. They ended with smiles, with, "We'll figure it out later." But something about those words didn't sit right with me. One evening, after another date with Emma, I called my friend Olivia. Unlike Ethan and Rachel, Olivia had always been brutally honest. She wasn't the type to tell people what they wanted to hear. She told them what they needed to hear. After listening quietly for nearly half an hour, she finally asked me one question. "Daniel, are you hoping these differences disappear, or do you actually believe they're compatible?" I didn't answer, because deep down, I already knew the truth. The question stayed in my head for the rest of the night. Are you hoping these differences disappear, or do you actually believe they're compatible? I barely slept. Every conversation Emma and I had shared over the past month replayed in my mind. None of them had been bad. In fact, she was one of the kindest people I'd ever met. That was the problem. There wasn't some huge red flag. There wasn't cheating. There wasn't lying. There wasn't constant arguing. There were simply 2 people who wanted different futures. The next afternoon, Emma texted me, "Dinner tomorrow, I found that Italian place you wanted to try." I stared at the message for almost 10 minutes. Part of me wanted to ignore everything and keep dating her. She made me happy. We laughed together, being around her felt easy, but another part of me kept asking one question. If we already know we want different lives, why wait until we're both more emotionally invested? I finally replied. "I'd still like to see you, but I think we should talk." She answered almost immediately. "Okay, is everything all right?" I typed 3 different responses before settling on the truth. "I think so. I just don't want to avoid an important conversation." The next evening, we met at a quiet cafe instead of the restaurant. Emma smiled when she saw me, but I could tell she already sensed something was wrong. We ordered coffee and sat by the window. For a few minutes, we talked about work and random things, almost pretending nothing had changed. Finally, I took a deep breath. "Emma, I really like you," she nodded. I like you too, but I don't think we're looking for the same future. She stayed quiet. I continued, you've always been honest about wanting to move abroad someday. I've always wanted to stay close to my parents. You aren't sure if marriage matters to you. It matters to me. None of us is wrong. But I don't want either of us to spend months hoping the other person changes. For a long moment, she just looked at her coffee, then she smiled sadly. I was wondering when we'd have this conversation. That surprised me. You were, she laughed softly. I noticed the same things. Neither of us had been ignoring the truth. We'd both just been hoping the other would bring it up first. I don't want us to resent each other a year from now, she said. Neither do I. There were no tears, no yelling, no accusations. We hugged outside the cafe, wished each other the best, and walked away. It hurt, but it felt like the right decision. A few days later, Ethan invited me over for a barbecue at his house. Rachel was there along with a few mutual friends. Everything seemed normal until Rachel asked, "So, how are things with Emma?" I took a sip of my drink before answering. We decided to stop seeing each other. The table went quiet. What? Ethan frowned. Why? We realized we wanted different things long-term. Rachel looked confused. That's it, yeah, she laughed. Daniel, every couple has differences. I know, you gave up way too quickly, I shrugged. I don't think either of us wanted someone to change for the other. Ethan leaned back in his chair. So, who convinced you to end it? No one convinced me. You talked to Olivia, didn't you? I looked at him. Yeah, Rachel crossed her arms. And you didn't ask us. Something about her tone immediately made me uncomfortable. I just wanted another perspective. But we've been together for almost 10 years, Ethan said. If anyone knows relationships, it's us. I forced a smile. I'm glad things work for you guys. Rachel wasn't satisfied. No, seriously, why Olivia? Why not us? The conversation suddenly didn't feel casual anymore. Everyone else at the table had gone quiet. I could already tell this discussion wasn't over. The backyard suddenly felt much quieter than it had a few moments earlier. Even the laughter from the kids playing next door seemed distant. Rachel kept looking at me, waiting for an answer. I smiled politely and tried to move the conversation along. I don't know, Olivia and I have just always talked about dating. It wasn't anything personal. I reached for another burger, hoping that would end it. It didn't. Rachel leaned forward. But why her? I looked up. What do you mean? I mean, she said, if you wanted relationship advice, why wouldn't you ask the only married couple in your friend group? Ethan nodded in agreement. Exactly, I let out a small laugh. I wasn't really looking for relationship advice, I just wanted another opinion. But that's relationship advice, Rachel replied. It is, I admitted. I just felt Olivia's perspective matched mine. Rachel exchanged a glance with Ethan. For some reason, that irritated her. So basically, she said, you trust her opinion more than ours. I sighed. It isn't about trust. Then what is it about? The questions kept coming. Every answer I gave only seemed to create another question. The rest of our friends had stopped talking completely. Someone quietly turned the music down. I hated being the center of attention. Ethan, I said calmly, it's really not a big deal. It is a big deal, he answered. We've been your friends for almost 10 years. I know, we've always been there for you. I know, so why would you ask someone else? I rubbed the back of my neck. Because I didn't know how to explain something without hurting them. The truth was simple. Just because someone had been in a relationship for a long time didn't automatically mean they had the kind of relationship I wanted. I'd watched them fight over the smallest things. I'd seen Rachel call Ethan lazy in front of everyone. I'd heard Ethan make jokes about Rachel's weight after she'd asked him not to. Every vacation we'd taken together included at least one argument where the rest of us awkwardly pretended not to hear. Then, 30 minutes later, they'd act like nothing happened. Maybe that worked for them, it wouldn't work for me, but saying that out loud felt unnecessarily cruel, so I tried one last time to avoid it. I just felt Olivia understood what I was asking. Rachel folded her arms. So we're not good enough, that's not what I said, it's exactly what you're saying. Ethan looked disappointed more than angry. I honestly thought we'd be the first people you'd come to. I didn't realize it mattered this much. Rachel laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. Apparently it doesn't matter to you. The conversation had gone completely off the rails. I glanced around the table, silently hoping someone would change the subject. Nobody did. Finally, Ethan spoke again. You know, we've been happily together for almost a decade. Rachel nodded proudly. We've built a life together, we own a house, we've survived hard times. So honestly, Ethan continued, I think we're probably the most qualified people you know when it comes to relationships. The words hit me harder than they should have. Not because they were arrogant, but because I couldn't stop thinking about every screaming match I'd witnessed over the years, every holiday ruined by an argument, every passive-aggressive comment. Every insult disguised as a joke. I took a slow breath. I could still walk away, I could smile, I could apologize, but something inside me had finally reached its limit. I looked at both of them. I didn't ask because I stopped myself. Rachel waited. So, I knew whatever came next would change the evening, maybe even our friendship. I opened my mouth. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Every pair of eyes at the table was on me. I could still back out. I could laugh it off. I could make up some excuse and change the subject. But Ethan repeated the question. So, I slowly put my drink down. I didn't ask you because. I paused, choosing my words carefully. The kind of relationship you're happy with isn't the kind of relationship I want for myself. Silence. Rachel blinked. Ethan stared at me as if he hadn't heard me correctly. What did you just say? Rachel asked. I kept my voice calm. I'm not saying you two shouldn't be together. I'm saying your relationship isn't the one I'd personally want. Rachel's face immediately turned red. So you think our marriage is a joke? No, you literally just said you wouldn't want what we have. I said it isn't what I want for my own life. That's the same thing. It isn't, Ethan finally spoke, his voice much quieter. Daniel, after everything we've been through together, that's honestly what you think of us, I sighed. I wasn't planning to say any of this. Then why did you? Because you kept asking. Rachel pushed her chair back so hard it scraped across the patio. No, you wanted to judge us. I didn't. You've always thought you were better than us. The accusation caught me completely off guard. What? No. Oh, please, she snapped. Every time Ethan and I argue, you sit there acting like some relationship expert. I've never acted like that. You don't have to say it. Your face says enough. The backyard had become painfully quiet. Even our other friends looked uncomfortable. Finally, Mark, one of the guys from our college group, cleared his throat. I think everyone just needs to calm down. Rachel turned toward him. No, I want to hear this. She looked back at me. Tell me exactly what's so terrible about our marriage. I rubbed my forehead. I don't want to do this. Do it, Rachel. No. Since you've clearly been judging us for years, let's hear it. I looked at Ethan. He wasn't angry anymore. He just looked hurt. That almost made me stay quiet. Almost. I took a slow breath. You two fight constantly. Neither of them responded. You insult each other in front of your friends. Rachel opened her mouth, but I continued. I've watched both of you call each other names over things that shouldn't even become arguments. We joke around, Rachel interrupted. Sometimes, but not always. Ethan looked down at the table. I continued carefully. I've seen entire weekends ruined because one of you made a sarcastic comment and neither of you would let it go. Every couple argues, Rachel said. I know, then why are we different? Because it doesn't stop. Another long silence. I've never once thought either of you didn't love each other, I said honestly. I believe you do, but from where I'm standing, I hesitated. It doesn't always look like you actually like each other. The words landed like a bomb. Rachel stood up. I can't believe you. She grabbed her purse from the chair. Ethan, let's go. Ethan didn't move. He just sat there staring at the table. Finally, he looked up at me. Is that really how everyone sees us? No one answered, not because they agreed, not because they disagreed, but because no one wanted to be the first person to break the silence. The silence felt endless. No one reached for their food. No one looked at each other. Even the music playing from the speaker had ended, leaving nothing but the sound of the wind moving through the trees. Ethan slowly looked around the table. Come on, he said quietly. Someone say something. Nobody did. Mark rubbed the back of his neck. Olivia looked down at her drink. Jason suddenly became very interested in his phone. That silence said more than any words could have. Rachel's expression changed. She had expected everyone to defend her. Instead, everyone looked uncomfortable. She laughed nervously. So that's it. Still, no one answered. Finally, Mark spoke. I don't think Daniel meant to hurt you. Rachel turned toward him. That's not what I asked. Mark hesitated, then he sighed. I think we've all noticed you two argue a lot. Rachel's smile disappeared. Olivia nodded slowly. I didn't want to say anything because it wasn't my place. Jason looked up. Same here. Rachel stared at each of them in disbelief. You've all been talking about us behind our backs. No, Olivia replied immediately. We've actually avoided talking about it because we didn't want to interfere. Ethan finally spoke. So everyone thinks our marriage is a disaster? No, Daniel said. That's not what anyone is saying. Ethan looked at me. Then what are you saying? I chose my words carefully. I'm saying that when I imagine the kind of marriage I want someday, I imagine feeling like my partner is also my best friend. Ethan frowned. And we're not, I answered honestly. Sometimes it doesn't look that way. Rachel folded her arms. You only see a few hours of our lives. That's true. You don't know what happens at home. I don't, so how can you judge us? I'm not judging your entire marriage. I looked at both of them. I'm telling you why I didn't ask for relationship advice. Another long silence followed. Then, unexpectedly, Olivia spoke. I actually understand why Daniel came to me. Rachel looked at her. Really? Olivia nodded. He wasn't asking how to save a relationship. He was asking whether two people with different life goals should continue dating. She continued. My advice wasn't break up. My advice was to decide whether either of them would eventually have to sacrifice the future they really wanted. Rachel didn't respond. Olivia looked at everyone around the table, and honestly, I think Daniel made the mature decision. That sentence hit Ethan harder than anything else. So ending things was mature. If you're incompatible, yes. Ethan shook his head. I don't agree. You don't have to, Olivia replied calmly. But some problems can't be fixed with compromise. Rachel suddenly laughed. So what now? She looked directly at me. You think you're going to find some perfect relationship where nobody argues? I smiled slightly. No, then what? I just want a relationship where respect never disappears, even during arguments. Rachel rolled her eyes. Good luck with that. I didn't answer. Because I wasn't trying to convince her, I was only explaining myself. A few minutes later, Ethan quietly stood up. I think we should head home. Rachel grabbed her bag without saying goodbye. Neither of them looked back as they walked toward their car. As the front door closed behind them, everyone remained silent. Finally, Jason let out a deep breath. Well, I don't think we'll all be hanging out together anytime soon. I had a feeling he was right, and deep down, I knew this conversation wasn't over. It was only the beginning. For the next week, I didn't hear a single word from Ethan or Rachel. No texts, no calls, nothing. At first, I figured they just needed some space. If I were in their position, I'd probably want the same thing. I replayed the conversation in my head over and over, wondering if I could have handled it differently. Maybe I should have stayed quiet. Maybe I should have walked away, but every time I thought about it, I came back to the same conclusion. I hadn't brought up their marriage. They had kept pushing until I finally answered honestly. Still, losing two friends I'd known for nearly 10 years wasn't easy. A few days later, Olivia called me. How are you holding up? She asked. I've been better. You feel guilty? A little, she sighed. Daniel, honesty isn't always comfortable. I know, but it doesn't mean you were wrong. I looked out the window at the rain falling outside my apartment. I never wanted to hurt them. I believe you. We talked for another 20 minutes before hanging up, and for the first time all week, I felt a little lighter. That Friday evening, my phone buzzed. Ethan. I stared at his name for a few seconds before answering. Hey, there was a long pause. Can we talk? Of course, just us. I agreed, and we decided to meet the next morning at a quiet coffee shop we'd been going to since college. When I walked in, Ethan was already there. He looked tired. The dark circles under his eyes were impossible to miss. After we ordered our coffee, neither of us spoke for almost a minute. Finally, he broke the silence. Rachel's still furious. I nodded. I figured. He stirred his coffee without looking at me. You know, I've been thinking about what you said. I stayed quiet. At first, I thought you were just insulting our marriage. He gave a small, exhausted smile, but then I started asking myself why it bothered me so much. He looked up. I think it bothered me because part of me knew there was some truth in it. I didn't interrupt. I love Rachel, he said softly. I really do, but somewhere along the way we stopped acting like a team. He rubbed his forehead. Everything turns into a competition. Who forgot what? Who works harder? Who apologizes first? It's exhausting. For the first time in years, Ethan wasn't defending his marriage. He was being honest. I should have told you this a long time ago, he admitted. We've actually been arguing about counseling for months. I looked surprised. Counseling, he nodded. Rachel thinks therapy means we've failed. And you, I think pretending everything is perfect is what's failing us. I leaned back in my chair. I'm sorry, Ethan, he shook his head. No, this isn't your fault. If anything, he smiled sadly, you forced me to stop pretending everything was fine. Just then his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen. Rachel, he didn't answer. Instead, he looked at me and quietly asked, Can I ask you one honest question? Sure, he took a deep breath. When you looked at us over the last few years, was it really that obvious? I looked at my oldest friend, and I realized this conversation was about to become even more difficult. I looked at Ethan for a long moment before answering. This wasn't the time for another brutal truth. It was the time for an honest one. I nodded slowly. Yeah. It was. He lowered his eyes and gave a quiet, disappointed laugh. I was afraid you'd say that. I never wanted to embarrass you. I know, I just didn't know how to bring it up. Ethan wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. You know what's funny? What? I used to think people envied our marriage. I frowned. Why? Because that's what everyone told us. He smiled bitterly. High school sweethearts, college together, bought a house before 30, good jobs, no financial problems, from the outside. We looked like the perfect couple, but inside, he whispered. We were exhausted. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he sighed. I don't even remember what half our arguments are about anymore. Sometimes we start fighting over dishes and somehow end up bringing up something that happened 3 years ago. I nodded. I've seen that happen. He looked embarrassed. Yeah, I guess everyone has. He leaned back in his chair. Rachel wasn't always like this. What do you mean? When we first started dating, we actually talked through problems. So what changed? He thought for a moment. I honestly don't know. Life. Maybe stress, work, money, expectations. We got so used to trying to win every argument that eventually we stopped trying to understand each other. His voice cracked slightly. And I don't even know when that happened. Hearing Ethan admit all of this hurt more than I expected, not because I was surprised, because I wasn't. I had watched it happen in slow motion over the years. You know, I said quietly, I never doubted that you loved each other. He looked at me. I still don't, but love isn't always enough. He nodded without arguing. I think we've confused staying together with being happy. Those words hung between us. After a while, Ethan checked his phone again. 3 missed calls, 5 unread messages. They're all from Rachel, I asked. Yeah, you should probably call her. I will. He hesitated before asking, would you ever apologize to her? I thought about it. I'll apologize for hurting her feelings, but I can't apologize for answering a question she kept asking. He nodded. That's fair. As we stood to leave, Ethan surprised me. He pulled me into a hug. It wasn't the quick, awkward kind. It was the hug of someone carrying around years of frustration. Thanks, he said quietly, for being honest. I smiled. I just hope things get better. So do I. That evening, I received a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, I immediately recognized the writing style. It was Rachel. If you think one conversation makes you an expert on my marriage, you're even more arrogant than I thought. Stay out of our lives from now on. I read the message twice, then I locked my phone. I didn't reply. Sometimes silence says more than another argument ever could, but deep down, I had a feeling this wasn't the last I'd hear from Rachel. Rachel's message stayed on my phone for 2 days. I read it more than once, but I never replied, not because I didn't have anything to say. Because I knew anything I wrote would only start another argument. Sometimes the healthiest response is no response at all. Life slowly returned to normal. I threw myself into work, started going back to the gym, and spent more weekends with my family. For the first time in months, my apartment felt peaceful. Then on a Tuesday afternoon, Olivia called me. Are you busy? I'm just finishing work. What's up? Her voice sounded uneasy. I think you should know something. My stomach tightened. What happened? I ran into Rachel at the grocery store. Oh, she asked if I'd talk to you, and I said no. Olivia hesitated before continuing. She told me you were trying to break up their marriage. I nearly laughed. What? She said you've always been jealous of Ethan and that you finally got what you wanted. I was speechless. That's ridiculous. I know, Olivia said, but she's telling people that. I thanked her for letting me know, but after hanging up, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I had stayed quiet. I hadn't responded to her text. I hadn't talked about them to anyone, yet somehow I had become the villain in her story. That weekend, Mark invited everyone to his birthday dinner. I almost didn't go. There was a good chance Ethan and Rachel would be there, and I wasn't looking forward to another confrontation. After thinking about it for a while, I decided I wasn't going to avoid my friends because of one uncomfortable conversation. When I arrived, most of the group was already seated. Mark greeted me with a hug. Glad you came, I smiled. Happy birthday. Then I noticed Ethan sitting at the far end of the table. He gave me a small nod. Rachel, however, didn't even look in my direction. The dinner started peacefully. People joked, shared stories from work, and teased Mark about getting older. For nearly an hour, everything was surprisingly normal. Then one of our newer friends who hadn't been at the barbecue asked an innocent question. So, how did you guys all become friends? Before anyone else could answer, Rachel spoke. We've known each other forever. She glanced at me. Although I guess not everyone values old friendships. The table went quiet. Mark sighed under his breath. I kept eating. I wasn't going to take the bait. A minute later, Rachel spoke again. Some people think they're relationship experts after staying single most of their lives. A few people exchanged uncomfortable looks. Still, I said nothing. Finally, Ethan leaned toward her. Rachel, she ignored him. No, I'm serious. She looked directly at me. If someone wants to judge other people's marriages, maybe they should get married first. I slowly put my fork down. The entire restaurant felt silent. I looked at Rachel calmly. I didn't come here to argue. Then stop acting like you're better than everyone. I've never said I was. You didn't have to. Before I could say anything else, Ethan stood up. That's enough. Everyone froze. He looked at Rachel with a seriousness I'd never seen before. He didn't start this. Rachel stared at him. What? He answered a question. You've been blaming him for weeks, but we're the ones who kept pushing. Rachel looked shocked. Ethan, no, his voice remained calm. We asked, he answered. You don't have to like what he said, but that doesn't make it his fault. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. Without another word, she grabbed her purse and walked out of the restaurant. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment before quietly saying, I'll go after her. As he hurried outside, no one at the table spoke. Mark finally broke the silence. I don't think this is about you anymore, Daniel. I looked toward the restaurant door where Ethan had disappeared. Neither did I. For the first time, it felt like the real battle wasn't between me and Rachel. It was between Ethan and Rachel themselves. The restaurant stayed quiet for several minutes after Ethan followed Rachel outside. No one knew what to say. Mark finally sighed. I think we should just call it a night. Everyone quietly agreed. As I walked to my car, I couldn't stop wondering if that would be the last time I'd see either of them. About 3 weeks passed. Life moved on. Work kept me busy and I tried not to think about everything that had happened. Then one Saturday morning my phone rang. It was Ethan. Hey, I answered. Can you meet me? His voice sounded calmer than it had in months. We met at the same coffee shop where we'd talked before. This time though, he looked different, not happier, just lighter. After we sat down, he smiled. Rachel and I started couples counseling. I blinked. Really? He nodded. It wasn't easy to convince her, but after what happened at Mark's birthday, she finally admitted we couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. How's it going? He laughed softly. Hard, really hard, but we're actually talking instead of arguing. For the first time in years, we're listening to each other. I smiled. I'm happy to hear that. He looked at me for a moment before speaking again. You know, I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything. I do. I kept pressuring you to explain why you didn't ask us for advice, and when you finally answered honestly, I blamed you for it. I shook my head. I could have said it more gently, maybe, he smiled. But it was still the truth. There was a long silence before he added, Rachel isn't ready to apologize yet. I understand, but she asked me to tell you something. I looked up. She said, he paused, that hearing your opinion hurt so much because deep down she already knew our relationship wasn't as healthy as she wanted everyone to believe. I didn't know what to say. Sometimes the hardest truths are the ones we already know. A month later, Mark organized another barbecue. This time I almost declined, but Ethan insisted. Please come. When I arrived, Rachel walked over before I even had a chance to sit down. For a second, I thought another argument was coming. Instead, she took a deep breath. I've been angry for a long time. I stayed quiet. I blamed you because it was easier than admitting we had problems. She looked down. I'm sorry. It wasn't a dramatic apology. It wasn't perfect, but it was sincere. I smiled. I'm sorry my words hurt you. She nodded. I know you weren't trying to destroy our marriage. I wasn't. I know. For the first time in weeks, we both smiled. That evening, as everyone laughed around the grill, I realized something important. Good friends don't always tell you what you want to hear. They tell you what you need to hear, even when it risks the friendship. Months later, Ethan texted me a picture of him and Rachel hiking together. Underneath the photo, he wrote, still in counseling. Still arguing sometimes, but now we're learning how to be on the same team instead of opposite sides. Thanks for being honest when nobody else was. I looked at the message and smiled. Their marriage wasn't magically perfect. Mine wasn't a story about breaking up a couple. It was a story about how one uncomfortable conversation forced 3 people to stop pretending. And sometimes the truth doesn't end a relationship. Sometimes it gives it the first real chance to survive.
So, what do you think if you were in Daniel's position? Would you have told the truth, or would you have stayed silent to protect the friendship? Let me know your thought in the comments. I read as many of them as I can. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another Reddit story. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.